This is the July 24, 2018 meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission of the Town of Fairfield. First, I'd like to announce that the public hearing on 54 Sasko Hill Road is off the agenda. That is being postponed, so if anybody is here for that public hearing, that will be put over to, do we have a new date?
It's most likely going to be in September.
In September, new date in September. All right, so C3, 54 Sasko Hill Road is adjourned. Other housekeeping is that the August 14th meeting is going to be adjourned as well. All right, we had taken a poll on that one due to schedules, both the schedule at TPZ and our schedules. August 14th is going to be canceled. Okay. So the first item on our agenda is meeting minutes from July 10th, 2018. Okay, motion to approve by Commissioner Francis. Okay, second by Commissioner McAleese.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, I was not present at the meeting, but I did review the Fair TV.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So that you raise a good point, Commissioner Levy. So you're fully up to speed. You watched the tapes from last session.
I did.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Elliott, you will be sitting in for Commissioner Meyer, and Commissioner Gordon, you're sitting in for Commissioner Corcoran. All right. Excellent. So we have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion or questions? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Minutes are adopted unanimously. Next item is old business, 5550 Congress Street, re-subdivision application of Nancy Perlin for 2 lots in a AAA zone.
Mr. Chairman, this is a 4.65 acre site proposed to be divided into 2 lots. One lot will have the existing dwelling, and the other lot will have an existing outbuilding that will allow the establishment of an independent dwelling on its own lot. There's proposed sight lines for the new driveway have been reviewed by the engineering department and are acceptable. The runoff from the proposed gravel driveway should be pitched into a swale along the edge of the driveway, and there's no other drainage needed if that driveway is to remain gravel. Since this property is in excess of 4 acres, an open space fee is required. The pre-subdivision land value is $671,700. Therefore, a 10% open space fee would be $67,170. So in addition to the comments regarding the drainage swale, we'd recommend a condition that an open space payment agreement be filed concurrent with the subdivision map, should this application be approved. The applicant is aware of that requirement and is aware of that figure. And that fee is not payable until the lots are sold. So as long as they own the lots, no fee is due. It's when the half is due with the sale of each lot sometime in the future. So it ends up being a deed restriction. Mm-hmm. So other than that, the lots do comply in all aspects to our AAA zone requirements, and that's all I have.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Francis. Second by Commissioner Noonan. Commissioner Francis?
I thought this was a good plan, and it complies with all our regulations, so I see no reason not to approve it. It has its own driveway.
So we have a couple of conditions that Mr. Wendt had mentioned. Would you amend your motion to incorporate those conditions?
To include the staff recommendations for conditions of approval.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Noonan?
Second.
Yep, all right, very good, thanks. Typically, there's land, right, to be allocated or a payment in lieu of that.
Right. In this case, since it's such a small piece, the open space would be less than, it would bring it down to just a hair above 4 acres. It's a corner parcel, doesn't adjoin any town open space. So a fee would be a better benefit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Anyone else have any comments? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The Re-subdivision application is approved unanimously with conditions as stated by Mr. Wendt. Next item is public hearing. We have a zoning regulation amendment, the application of the Affordable Housing Committee to amend Section 2.36 to establish an inclusionary zoning fee.
Thank you.
Mr. Barnhart, welcome.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, for the record, my name is Mark Barnhart. I'm the Director of Community Economic Development for the town. I'm appearing this evening on behalf of the Affordable Housing Committee of the Town of Fairfield to present a proposed amendment to Section 2.36 of the town's zoning regulations to establish an inclusionary zoning fee. Emmeline is kindly handing out some additional information with respect to this proposal. I want to begin with regard to our statutory authority. The power by which this commission may enact an inclusionary zoning fee is found in Section 8.2I of the Connecticut General Statutes, which states in relevant part that any municipality having zoning authority may, by regulation of the body exercising such zoning authority, implement inclusionary zoning regulations, requirements, or conditions, including but not limited to the making of payments into a housing trust fund to be used for constructing, rehabilitating, or repairing housing affordable to persons and families of low and moderate income. And I included in your handout a copy of that statutory reference. The proposed text amendment before you would seek to establish an inclusionary zoning fee of $5 per thousand of construction value, or 1/2 of 1%, that will be paid into a dedicated housing trust fund for the acquisition, construction, and rehabilitation of affordable housing. Earlier this year, the representative town meeting unanimously approved an ordinance establishing a housing trust fund. The housing trust fund is specifically authorized to receive monies for the purposes of affordable housing from sources that may include but are not limited to inclusionary zoning fees. Funds deposited into the housing trust fund may be used for a variety of expenses related to the acquisition, construction, or rehabilitation of affordable housing, and subject to the approval of the Board of Selectmen. I've also included in your packet a copy of this ordinance. The proposed amendment is patterned after a similar zoning regulation in the town of New Canaan, which established a fee of $10 per 1,000 of construction value for such purposes. The committee is proposing or recommending to you a lower fee inasmuch as home values and costs are a little lower here than they are in New Canaan. But similar to New Canaan, the proposed fee would apply only to new construction or additions, both residential and commercial, or institutional in nature. The application submitted on behalf of government entities and those that have already made provisions for affordable or below market rate housing units within their developments would be exempted from the inclusionary zoning fee, and projects involving interior renovations, accessory or temporary structures, or those not resulting in an increase in building square footage would also be excluded from the fee. The purpose of the proposal is to provide a dedicated revenue stream that could be used to finance the development of affordable housing in Fairfield. While the town has made substantial progress in recent years, according to figures published annually by the State Department of Housing in 2017, the state only counted 2.25% of the town's housing stock as qualifying as affordable housing. Under Connecticut law, municipalities having less than 10% of its housing designated as affordable must demonstrate that a rejection of an affordable housing development proposal is necessary to protect the public health and safety, and that those considerations outweigh the need for affordable housing within the community. I know all of you are painfully aware of this particular section of the state statute, section 8-30G. I provided a copy of the most recent list of affordable housing as recognized by the state as part of your packet for tonight's presentation. If enacted, the proposed inclusionary zoning fee would build upon the work that has already been done by this commission, particularly the commission's efforts to establish an inclusionary zoning regulation which requires that any development project that results in a net increase of 10 or more dwelling units set aside not less than 10% of those units as below market rate housing. The Housing Trust Fund and Inclusionary Zoning Fee would provide yet another tool with which the town can create and or preserve affordable housing. This proposal is consistent with the recommendation of the town's most recently updated Affordable Housing Plan. As you know, the Affordable Housing Committee, at the direction of the Board of Selectmen, undertook an 18-month process, public process, to update its Affordable Housing Plan, which concluded with its presentation to an acceptance by the Board of Selectmen in December of 2014. Among the action steps that were specifically enumerated in the plan were recommendations that the town establish a housing trust fund and adopt an inclusionary zoning regulation. Again, included in tonight's handout are excerpted copies of the Affordable Housing Plan, specifically the action steps that were in that plan. The proposal before you this evening seeks to implement this important policy recommendation. Fairfield has had a long history of working to develop affordable housing, acting both on its own accord and in partnership with various nonprofit and community organizations. These projects typically rely upon grant funding and other subsidies, such as donation of town-owned property, usually multiple sources, over some time to finance construction and other costs to meet its affordability goals. Because of this fact, they also take considerable time to come to fruition, and frequently those federal and state grant funds come with some conditions or strings attached. Funds for acquisition or certain pre-development costs are often the hardest to come by. The town's experience with Greenfield Commons, a small 10-unit elderly development that we worked with Mutual Housing on Villa Avenue to develop, is not uncommon, where it took 5 years from project initiation to final occupancy. So enactment of this change would provide funds that could readily be used to help subsidize or finance these types of projects to meet the town's goals, including a possible moratorium under Section 8-30G of the Connecticut General Statutes. Under the state statutes, communities can apply for a moratorium, provided that we meet certain goals. It's based on a census count of dwelling units. We would need 433 housing unit equivalency points, and at last count, we're roughly 3/4 of the way there, and there are other projects that you're familiar with that you have acted upon, such as Trademark 2, that are in the pipeline, not included in that assessment. I think we all know that we're not going to get there overnight, but we need to be in a position to take advantage of those opportunities as they are presented to us to achieve our goals. We did take a look at the impact of this proposed change based on a review of building permits that have been issued over the past 3 years, which has been a fairly active period in our history. But according to those records from the building department, there have been roughly 600 permits issued during the last 3 years that we analyzed that would potentially be subject to this fee, or roughly 200 per year. Of those, the vast majority involve residential construction, as you would expect, and roughly 60% of those involve additions versus the 40% for new construction. So that's really the split that we've seen over the last 3 years. For that 3-year period, Fairfield saw an average of 81 permits per year for residential new construction and 113 permits per year for additions that would be subject potentially to the new fee. Commercial permits averaged 5 per year for the same period. Our analysis showed that with this proposed inclusionary zoning fee of 0.5%, the town could potentially realize $350,000 per year for the housing trust fund that could be used for affordable housing purposes.
I'm sorry, what was the number?
350,000 per year.
350.
350. And I included that analysis as tab 5 in your report. So what we did was we took a 3-year period, 2015 to 2017, totaled it all up and averaged it out, tried to take away some of the fluctuations you might see from year to year. In conclusion, the proposed fee, coupled with the recently established Housing Trust Fund, would provide yet another tool with which to expand housing opportunities in town to meet the needs of our residents. On behalf of the Affordable Housing Committee, we respectfully request your favorable action on this proposal, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Barner. This certainly has been in development in the pipeline for a very long time. So I'd like to just start by saying thank you on behalf of the Commission and the town to you and the Affordable Housing and all the people that worked on this. Thank you very much for bringing this to our agenda. Does anyone have any questions? Commissioner Noonan?
For the trust fund the trust fund would be used to for development or projects for affordable housing. How would the process go, so to speak, if a project came up for affordable housing? There was land somewhere, for example, that a town could use. What would be the process to go about developing that?
The trust fund specifies a few steps. One, firstly, the proposal would have to be reviewed by my office and the Affordable Housing Committee, and a recommendation made to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen would be the ultimate authority as to whether or not to approve funding for that particular project. We haven't worked out the full application process at this point, but I think in order to respond to opportunities that come up, we're not thinking of an annual funding cycle, but rather an open application period or some combination thereof, where we might solicit applications on a regular basis, but also be able to respond to needs that arise during the course of the year. So there would be an application process that would have to be reviewed by my office, and then a recommendation made by the Affordable Housing Committee to the Board of Selectmen for their ultimate disposition.
Would the town would the town be seeking out these opportunities, or could a developer make that application?
We would think mostly it would be a nonprofit or for-profit developer that would make the application, and they would have to demonstrate, the extent to which the funds are necessary in order to make the project work. In most cases, affordable housing projects require some level of subsidy in order for them to be affordable, and so our thought would be that this would be the gap financing to help realize that affordability objective.
Would a project have to be 100% affordable? Or,
Could be, yeah, absolutely.
but it doesn't have to be.
It wouldn't have to be necessarily. I can give a couple examples. We had for many years, and this would be using existing housing stock, for many years we had a partnership with a nonprofit community where they would acquire existing 2- and 3-family houses, and we would provide funds under a community development block grant program to rehab those, with the provision that they be deed restricted as affordable. And unfortunately, their opportunity or ability to secure funds for the acquisition have dried up. And so, again, there might be an opportunity to seed some of those efforts, so we might be able to respond to, again, opportunities that present themselves during the course of the year. The other issue that I'm most familiar with, that I, again, am looking at potential funding sources, is the former Navy housing site, or Parkview Commons, which post-Sandy, these were units that weren't directly damaged or substantially damaged by the storm, but because they're in a flood zone, and because they didn't suffer substantial damages, they weren't eligible for grant funding in order to elevate. But because they're affordable, there's no opportunity really to provide sufficient equity in the home to incentivize the private property owners, or they don't even have the means to elevate those structures. So again, there might be an opportunity to preserve existing housing by providing some funds for that purpose.
Do you have criteria that either now, or will you develop criteria in order to judge these applications?
Yes, we will.
But
We don't have criteria at present, but we would most likely take advantage of the work that's been done not only by New Canaan, but by others, both in the state of Connecticut and Massachusetts, where housing trust funds are more prevalent.
Thank you.
So, we're here to establish an amendment to our zoning regulations that would require the fee to be paid into a trust fund that would then be administered by your office and the first selectman having final authority over the funding decisions.
The Board of
right?
Selectmen, right.
Right, Board of Selectmen. And the trust fund was, the infrastructure in the town that makes this possible is that the RTM has considered this and adopted sort of has opened the trust fund.
An ordinance establishing a trust
An
fund.
ordinance to, thank you, an ordinance to establish the trust fund into which the fees that we would collect would be deposited, which then get administered as you guys are just talking about. So just to be clear, we are not here sitting in judgment or consideration of the trust fund. That is for the RTM, and that they did already consider that. I think it's important for us to all understand that we have these considerations of the application process and so forth, but we are not sitting in consideration or judgment of that process here tonight. And we're not sitting in consideration or judgment of the administration of the funds by the Board of Selectmen or how they would go about that process. So it's a huge step and very important, but our role in this puzzle is fairly limited here tonight.
Yes.
So.
Thank you for that clarification.
All right. So maybe you could just talk a little bit then about the stuff that I just talked about. Just walk us through that, the RTM, the trust fund. Are there meets and bounds? Are there sort of things set up within the context of the trust fund that, for our information only?
Other than what's contained in the ordinance and what I've just described, no, not specifically. So it would be for the purpose of creating affordable housing, but I think the RTM wisely didn't want to necessarily limit where we could best achieve that ultimate goal by directing it only for rehab versus acquisition versus new construction. So I think any of those options might potentially be available to an applicant. I think for the most part, we're anticipating that nonprofit housing developers would most likely avail themselves of that, and more likely it would be more on the 100% to substantial affordable versus those that are private for-profit sector developers. So
right. So if we have if we have $1 million in the trust fund, it would certainly be more advantageous to the town that the Board of Selectmen administer those funds with respect to a property that was 100%
Right.
affordable units as opposed to one that was 10% affordable.
right.
Right? We get a whole lot more bang for our buck, so to speak, in the context of expansion of affordable housing when those funds are administered on more
Absolutely.
appropriate projects, right?
Yep. I would agree, and I think you pointed out also a good point, which is that we do have an inclusionary zoning regulation, which requires that 10% for those developments more than 10 units, set aside 10% of those housing units as affordable. This is not in lieu of or in addition to. We certainly didn't want to double up on an applicant by also imposing a fee, so that's why we felt it appropriate to recommend to you that those projects be excluded, but there is no opt-out provision for those either. We're looking for them to create those units as part of the overall development. And we wouldn't anticipate that those applicants would then seek funding through this housing trust fund because that's a requirement of our condition. We believe the market's strong enough to support that on its own.
Good.
And that's been borne out by the evidence to date.
Right. You also mentioned, and I might have misheard this, a loan program where a developer might seek funding through the trust fund for a loan to develop an affordable project that might get repaid.
I didn't say that specifically, but that is how our community development block grant program typically works in terms of rehab funds that we provide to applicants. Is a no interest indefinite term loan, but ultimately, or a declining balance loan, one or the other. So a declining balance loan is for a set term, and over the course of the year it can go to zero if all the conditions are met. But typically, we do set these up as no interest indefinite term loans that are repaid when the property is sold. And that's one way of keeping the fund. We have additional funds that we can then use to provide assistance to somebody else.
For the next project, yeah, yeah. Very good. Okay. Commissioner Levy?
Thank you. Just in terms of the mechanics of implementing this, since we will be looking at a proposed amendment when it comes up for our review next hearing. As worded, it says all applications for a zoning permit shall be accompanied by an inclusionary fee. Now, at that stage, oftentimes the cost of construction, nobody has any idea. And that's the other question, is when would this be collected? Would it be when a building permit's issued?
Yes.
Okay, so...
Yes, so the mechanics would be at the point in time which a building permit, an applicant seeks a building permit, the value, the fee would be calculated at that time and collected by zoning staff as part of their review of, and sign off on that permit.
Yeah, so maybe we need to clarify as to that mechanics as to when it's calculated and paid, and equally going forward, that would then apply whenever a building permit is issued after, adoption perhaps. So
We would certainly be open to that proposed amendment.
So it might be it's something that's already in the works at such time as they apply for a permit, then such a fee may be due. So basically our role is just to authorize as part of the zoning process the payment of this fee in connection with an application.
Correct.
And as to the use of the funds and so forth, that would be somebody else's bailiwick.
That was dictated by the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, Commissioner Mackles.
You may have touched on this, and perhaps I missed it. There's been a lot going around. But it seems to me, reading under B, like the third and fourth sentence, excuse me, third and fourth line, to be paid into a housing trust fund to be used for constructing, rehabilitating, or repairing housing affordable to persons and families of low and moderate income. That what we're trying to do is to promote new affordable housing, right? And I'm wondering, that I almost read that as if I already have affordable housing, but I need to get some work done on my house, I can go to this fund to get funds for that. I wonder if we need to clarify that a little bit.
The intent is, as you describe, is to provide opportunities to, well, I would say this, we could use it to preserve existing affordable housing if that were the case. If there's potential that we could lose that. And the example I provided,
Sure.
Absent some intervention by the town at some point to elevate these structures or make improvements to those units that are in a flood zone, I suspect that we may have to discharge them from honoring their deed restrictions. That's not to say that when they go to sell, they would fully recoup the value of that structure in the open market, but it becomes at some point, in my view, untenable because they're not able to realize the return on their investment to elevate the structure because of the affordable housing restrictions, and yet they're paying a premium on those because they're in the flood zone and aren't elevated. So it could be to preserve it, and in that instance it could be a rehab type project, but I think generally speaking I would agree with you that the intent would be to create new units. That would be part of the evaluation of a project and whether the town's intervention or assistance was even necessary to achieve our goals. And our goals are to create, or in some instances, preserve existing affordable housing so it doesn't go away. That's
Okay. So maybe just leave it as is. It seems to be.
It's kind of patterned on the same language in the inclusionary zoning statute, and again, we kind of copied what New Canaan did. It seems to be working there, so we thought that why reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So,
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
I should
Yeah.
mention, I'm sorry, that there are members of the Affordable Housing Committee here. I forgot to acknowledge. We have the chair and vice chair here. So,
Welcome and thank you for all of your diligence and hard work on this. And it's been years. I mean, I remember the public meetings at which we sat in the Board of Education room and put our little ticks on the boxes and colored circles on the that's and the thits, and we came up with the various proposals that are now in the action plan. And I think you mentioned that was issued in 2015.
2014, 2015.
2014,
yes.
2015, that's 3 years ago now. You know, we've obviously, as you mentioned, we've ticked off a
Quite a
number
few.
of the other
Yes.
proposals, and you know, we're making progress, and this is, I think, a substantial proposal that will be very beneficial to our goals.
Thank you.
So, anyone else have any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Barnhart. Is there any member of the public that wishes to be heard? Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Samorco, and I'm the chairman of the Affordable Housing Committee. Without reiterating everything that Marcus said, I just would like the committee to know, or the committee to know that the Affordable Housing Committee unanimously supports this proposal. And we've worked diligently over the past several years to put all of this together, and we thank you for your consideration.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Reber.
Jan Reber, Beaumont Street. I just want to address Commissioner Noonan's point about how this actually has worked. You've heard a lot about New Canaan. New Canaan has actually used this money primarily with their own housing authority. It would be equivalent to us giving the money to, for instance, to rehab Pine Tree or something. They've done it twice now. The first time they used over $1 million. Now, just a couple weeks ago, they've given $175,000 from their trust fund to hopefully add about 40-some affordable units at one of their developments. So they focus theirs very much on what the town itself, through its housing authority, is doing.
Thank you. I would hope that our Housing Committee, Affordable Housing Committee, would likewise take the same priorities, and that the Board of Selectmen would focus on town-owned properties and developments. Any other members of the public wish to be heard?
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Bill Lenahan. I live in 42 Olma Drive. I'm also a member of the Fairfield Senior Advocates. I strongly recommend enacting this inclusionary zoning proposal. As I look at New Canaan, which is $10 on 1,000, I also know that their homes are on average much higher, and but they are, if my facts are correct, they are at 2.7% of affordable housing, and if, as Mark said, we are at 2.25%, we do have some catch-up to do. So this $5 fee is a small step in the right direction, and I hope the committee can look at this fee perhaps next year or in future years and perhaps increase it, perhaps take a look at 7.5 or even $10 as New Canaan has now, because I'm sure they may raise their rates in future years also. So I thank you for all your work and diligence for our town, and I hope this proposal gets enacted. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Fee wasn't $10, but the ordinance has already been passed, as you said, so we have nothing to say about it.
So we can talk about this in our executive session. This is still public comment, and the regulation amendment is what has been proposed in our packet, and it's been proposed at $5. So we can discuss that in our executive session.
Good evening. My name is Steve Grothwall. I live at 132 Adley Road, Fairfield, and I'm a member of the Affordable Housing Committee. And I just wanted to follow up on something that Jan Reber had mentioned a minute ago. A couple of years ago, the Affordable Housing Committee did the update to the Affordable Housing Plan, And the subtitle of that plan was Taking Control of Our Future. And the steps that we've taken, with your help and with the RTM's help, has each given us another tool to take control of our future. The inclusionary zoning fee, if we were to use it like New Canaan did, it could be a particularly strong tool. They used the fee in conjunction with the Housing Authority to build one project in the center of town. They used their money so that they could decide where it was going to be, what it was going to look like, and how big it was going to be, the density. And building that one project got them a moratorium and got them halfway to the second moratorium. They're now taking money to try to expand an existing Housing Authority project that, if they're successful, it will give them the second moratorium and get them halfway to the third moratorium. So for New Canaan, it's been a very powerful tool, and I think that Fairfield can also use it successfully. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Commissioner Francis, we can ask Mr. Barnhart on rebuttal about the proposal. Forgive me, I didn't realize. Does any other members of the public wish to be heard on this? Okay, then Mr. Barnhart, if you don't mind, I think we have a question for you on rebuttal. Commissioner Francis.
I wondered why we didn't do the $10 fee that New Canaan did.
Well, I think one of the issues, we took a very conservative take in recognition that New Canaan's market is a bit different than ours in terms of housing values and whatnot. I think we also want to balance the needs to provide for affordable housing, funds for affordable housing, but also didn't want to place an undue burden on any individual property owner, or developer, or applicant. We wanted to strike an appropriate balance. And so that was an important consideration as we went through this, to make sure that we weren't doing something that would have a significantly deleterious effect on either commercial development or even placing some kind of undue burden on any one property owner or developer. So we wanted to make sure that we struck a balance between the two, allowing for development to occur, but also meeting a community need or a public goal, which is to provide funding for affordable housing. So we took a more conservative take, but of course, it's up to you in that regard. That was our recommendation, but that's how we arrived at it.
Let me ask a follow-up question. Is there ever a difference in the fee between a private homeowner doing a $50,000 addition to his house and a developer doing a huge development?
Well, the fee that we're proposing or recommending to you is based on construction value, and it's based on those projects that would actually result in an increase in square footage. So if it's an addition that adds to the footprint or the square footage of the house, that would be subject to the fee, but of course it would be based on and commensurate with the value of the construction. So a $50,000 addition would be much different than $1 million new construction.
But you didn't see any instance in Massachusetts, you said, had a lot of these, where commercial developers were charged a different fee than a homeowner?
There are many
Adding a
different
family
ways in
room or
which this could be done. We thought that, again, applying it to projects that resulted in an increase either in the housing stock that adds to kind of the denominator of the equation as we increase the number of housing units, that it arguably puts us further away from our goal if you're looking at that way, but also that, you know, we thought it would be appropriate for others to share in the burden. There'd be some burden sharing. We have projects now, if you're a developer and you're doing 10 or more units, you fall under our inclusionary zoning regulation. There's been some discussion about maybe increasing that in transit zones, increasing that percentage in exchange for the additional density that we're providing. So again, this is just another way, another tool that we saw as an opportunity to provide for affordable housing in another way. So.
And could you explain about the moratorium of affordable housing?
Yes,
We're
so...
supposed to have 10% of our housing stock be affordable.
Well, I think maybe I left that out of my public remarks, but I think we all can appreciate that 10% is a somewhat unrealistic goal for many of the communities in this state. From my perspective, it's not a question, we're not going to be able to build our way out of it. It's a ridiculous number of units that we'd have to actually construct, and all of which would have to be affordable or substantially affordable in order for us to make that objective in that fashion. So, and I don't see, a massive shift in terms of taking existing housing stock and making it deed restricted for 40 years such that it would count towards the state's inventory. So that really leaves us as an opportunity to, again, control our own destiny in Mr. Grathwohl's terms. The best we can possibly seek in terms of achieving that is a temporary moratorium, a 4-year moratorium. And it's a fairly heavy lift for a community this size. We have 20,000 plus housing units, and in order to qualify for a moratorium, you need 2%, the housing unit equivalency points, based on a calculation of 2% of that total number of housing units at the last census. So that puts us at 433 points, substantially lower in a community like New Canaan, where you can conceivably get to that in 1 or 2 projects. For us, it's been a series of smaller projects, and each one we're making progress toward that goal, but we're still a little short. And we can only count those units. In fact, right now in the pipeline, we have enough to qualify for a first moratorium, but we can only count them at the point at which they're occupied, built and fully occupied, so that we have a deed restriction in place. So we've done a lot of good work in this area. We haven't gotten full recognition for it, but again, this would help us achieve those goals hopefully a little bit quicker.
I would just add to that, the point is not just to get the moratorium. The point is to take these strides to get the moratorium so that we can then be in control of where those affordable housing units and how those affordable housing units are built, so that developers under the state statute 830G do not come in and avoid entirely our zoning regulations under the statute. So so then you're moving from one to the next, and all the while increasing the stock of affordable housing in constructive and real and meaningful ways. But I think that's the way that the statute was really designed, and that's the way we have to work from within it. Right?
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have any other questions? Anything else to add? No? Very good. Thank you, Mr. Barnhart. Thank you to all of the members of the Affordable Housing Committee that are here. And I'll close the public hearing on this item. Next is 1427, 1443 Kings Highway, special permit application of John and Timothy Philbin for a mixed-use commercial and residential building in the Design Commercial District and the Commerce Drive District.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is John Fallon. I'm an attorney here in Fairfield, and I'm pleased to be representing John and Tim Philbin, who are both here with me tonight, along with Pat Rose, who I'll introduce shortly. Following up your conversation that you just had, I think it's interesting and appropriate that we have this application in front of you tonight, because I think it does point out the challenges with regard to affordable housing development that often exert themselves, especially with regard to projects that are not in volume as substantial as some you may have seen. In October of last year, 2017, the Commission approved on this site for the Philbins a 24-unit residential project brought to you under 8-30G. The Philbins were and are, they were very, very excited about this development. They worked very, very hard on it. Not that it matters particularly, but they spent a lot of money bringing it to you for fruition. And they were very, very appreciative of the Commission's approval and support. Unfortunately, as they focused on the actual cost of construction with regard to the proposed building that was approved, took a careful look at the rents as they would be able to achieve them, especially with the restriction of 30% of the units for a 40-year period under the restrictions that are imposed under the Affordable Housing Statute. It just came to pass that the project was not feasible financially for them to do. They made repeated efforts to see if they could get it funded. They wanted to do the project very much, but there was no lender available who, when looking at the cost of construction and the rent roll that could be achieved based upon the deed restriction, would finance the project. So without getting into what you just discussed, I think it's a very healthy thing, just generally, not that the fund that you've just talked about is likely going to be used to subsidize private developers, but I think it's important that the town be proactive if you determine to pass that amendment, and I don't mean to speak to it, but I guess I do, I'm in favor of it, to ensure that there will be more creative ways, because this statute is a tough statute when you impose, especially on smaller scale projects, the requirements with regard to affordable rentals for 30% of the units. So having said that, we're back in front of you tonight, and we're seeking a project that is compliant with your regulations in the design commercial district. As Pat will explain to you, on this site of 13,498 square feet, we propose to construct a 6,599 square foot mixed-use development, which will consist of 3,360 square feet of retail located on the first floor and 3 residential units above. As was the case with regard to the prior applications, the Philbins are generational local developers with all their roots in this community. They are anxious to bring something positive and exciting to this site. Working again with Pat, who we'll introduce shortly, we have endeavored to come up with a design that he will share with you that we think is attractive and is going to have a very significant and a positive influence and catalyst, if you will, to the development in this area, including the adjacent transit-oriented design overlay. We anticipate that these residential units will be occupied by residents who are over 50 or younger people. We hope that they will be attractive to people who might even work in the town, employees, police, fire, teachers, and the like. We do feel very confident that the retail and residential components of this development will be very attractive due to the unique advantage of the proximity of the Fairfield Metro train station. And this project, I can tell you, does proof out from a lender standpoint in terms of cost of construction and rent roll. So I think it's something that will come to fruition and, as I said, have a positive impact. Obviously, what we propose is a permitted use under sections 12.418 and 12.426 of the regulations. We are proposing, as Pat will elaborate on, 17 parking spaces. Under section 28.6.1, we are respectfully requesting that you do allow a reduction in the required parking for the 3 residential units by 50%. That will bring the requirement for the parking for these 3 residential units to 3 spaces. We think this request is reasonable, particularly here in light of the nature of the residential units we propose and the fact they are located very close in proximity to the Fairfield Metro train station. So I'd like to introduce Pat Rose, who will give you an overview with regard to the site plan and the architectural design, and then I'll have some comments to summarize.
Good evening. Patrick Rose from Rose, Tizo and Company, licensed architect in the state of Connecticut and representing the Philbins. Project before you, as you remember, we're bounded by streets in as much as we have Kings Highway in the front, we have Ash Creek Boulevard to our left, and we have Constant Common Way to our right. And behind us, we have the retention pond for the train station. So we're a landlocked piece of property that we're dealing with. as part of the design and trying to meet the standards within our zone, we have located the building on Kings Highway as it fronts about 5 foot off of Kings Highway, and we are up against our property line on Ash Creek Boulevard to the side. So we have provided entrance into the site towards Constant Comment Way here and a parking lot behind, so providing 17 spaces. What we've done is provide sidewalks from the main sidewalk off of Kings Highway into 4 retail spaces that are proposed, 3,360 square foot of retail, and then sidewalks to stairways, exterior stairways, on the 2 sides, which lead up to a balcony behind the building for entrance into the residential units. So they're separated front and back to some degree, but we also still are maintaining a sidewalk to the rear of the building with exits and entrances potentially from the parking lot side of the building. Yes, sir.
It's exactly what I was just looking at.
Yep.
So on the back, underneath the deck, which is going to, on the second floor, which is going to serve as like an entry facade, right?
Correct.
Do the businesses have entry and exit?
The businesses have entry and exit below that deck.
Yeah.
There's a door and there's a window, smaller window on that side. If they wish to use that as an entrance, they can. So we're providing that. This also provides a second means of egress if necessary.
Okay. All right, because they have entry in the front for retail, right?
Correct.
And everybody uses the same dumpster in the parking lot?
Correct. It's the same dumpster facility in the corner of the parking lot. That's
Is there
correct.
a generator on site?
There is not a generator on the site now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One question, what's this land over here, anything?
It's the town of Fairfield's land right now.
Okay.
They've been luckily enough to take over that piece of property from the state.
Okay, thanks.
So what we've done as our previous approval for the 24-unit building, essentially our impervious area is very similar to that project. So the drainage that was designed and approved by the engineering department and also approved by inland wetlands is the same as what we had previously. So that's all gone back through that, and there's no issues with that. What we've done for the building, on the first floor, we're showing the 4 retail spaces, approximately 800 square foot each, entrances off the sidewalk on Kings Highway, entrances off the rear of the building also, showing a space for bathroom, mechanical unit, for each one of those 4 retail spots. And then on each side, a stairway up to a walkway in the rear of the building, which overhangs that parking lot, and then 3 2-bedroom residential units, 2 bedroom, 2 bath, washer dryer stack, typical 1,080 square foot 2-bedroom unit. So it's fairly straightforward as far as the housing itself. This up. The building itself, fairly simple and definitely separates the 2 uses as from a building as it appears, is that the lower level will be brick with windows along the Kings Highway, along Ash Creek. There are windows also to meet the requirements of the zone. There is a overhang on the front and the rear, which protects the entrances into the retail spaces. And then the second floor is a vinyl siding, facade, large windows, gables. And then what we've done is because we've got exit stairways on either side and a balcony that runs the whole length of the back of the building, we've got a large overhang that's protecting that balcony and those stairways from the weather as required by the building code, which we have to do. So that's where we're using the roof essentially to protect those egresses. What we've done on some of the, just to go back to our site plan, our mechanical units, condensers are underneath the overhang on the two sides. There are 7 of them altogether, 1 per each unit, 4 retail and 3 residential. And then there will be meters that will be in the open areas on the back of the building, or electrical meters.
Are the mechanicals all shielded?
They are not shielded on this side. There's a sidewalk that brings people from the back to the front here. They are shielded on this side with vegetation.
Where's the elevator to the second floor?
There is no elevator for the second floor. It's not required based on the number of units that we have. Accessibility is not required.
So, and for that reason, they're not handicap accessible.
They're not handicap accessible, that's correct. You can build up to 3 units that are not. Once you get to that 4th unit, then you have to make provisions.
Can you look at the landscaping / parking plan with me for a moment?
Certainly.
So we have 17 spaces, which means we need shade trees in the parking lot, yes? So I know we have a number of trees that are around the perimeter here, and I don't see a problem with that. I'm looking at the kinds of trees, though, and I'm wondering if they're not invasive, or native, rather. I see a pear tree, flowering pear. And I don't know the answer to the question, so.
Correct. You have flowering pear,
Yeah.
flowering dogwood.
Is that a native tree, a pear tree?
Certainly used it in New England before.
Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, I just was going to say this, we did have a code enforcement review, I was going to mention on May 20.
I didn't see that.
I don't believe, let me see if the tree warden
Did
was
he
there.
say anything?
But I would say this to you, Mr. Chairman, if the commission wants to staff, the tree warden, if you look at page 3 of the Philbin minutes, I'm just reading as they go.
Yep.
Juniperus scopulorum, quote, skyrocket. If planted too close to the corner would impose a sightline issue. When installing, they would need to be set far enough back so the sightline does not run into play, which we've done. Then
Yep.
it says substitute all dogwoods and flowering pear trees along the sides of the property, substitute with, so I think you've addressed it. Substitute with
See?
Tilia cordata.
You know your plantings.
Tilia cordata for a little leaf linden. So I think there's a recommendation from the tree warden that those pear trees, which we astutely picked up on, be replaced with Tilia cordates. The
Okay.
tree warden comment number 2, and we're happy to do that.
So,
as
do you, all trees no less than 2.5-inch caliber. Do you have any objection to a condition of approval to comply with all of the tree warden?
The comments of the tree warden can be established as conditions of approval.
Okay.
That was certainly our intention.
All right, thank you.
No, there are no trees across the whole back. They're all along the side.
Correct, in as much as that this actually is our swale, and along this whole back for collection of stormwater, and this entire area back here is planted on the train station retention pond area. There's nothing to
Planted
screen.
what? What did you say after swale?
Swale, the whole area behind here, which is the train station retention pond, is fully landscaped, and there's nothing really to protect. It's already been landscaped.
So, can we just look at the code enforcement for a moment then? So we've got number 5 on page 5. The 2 parking spaces facing Ash Creek.
Yeah, we've addressed that. This,
Okay.
previously, there were parking spaces at the end, and we've changed that.
Yes, we did that.
Okay. Number 7, the beds restricting the pedestrian flow. Did you address that?
Yeah,
Okay.
we've created the sidewalk between the rear and the front.
Got it, thank you. Number 9,
The Ash Creek elevation does not appear. Excuse me, sir, you're going to talk, I'm going to have to ask you. Yes. I'm sorry.
no, don't apologize. Thank you very much for...
Thank you, I should know that after all this time.
The Ash Creek elevation does not appear to meet the design requirements for 60% transparent. We've actually added windows on the Ash Creek elevation. As you look at the,
So the elevation we see is after the fact, after this issue
You-
came up.
You've modified the plan.
they're on this set of drawings,
Yeah.
actually. Yes, yes,
That's
for
what I
that.
figured.
Yes, they are.
It looked like it was close, so.
Right, right.
Okay, no, that's
I
fine.
should have said at the beginning that we had a code meeting, which you now know, and that we believe we've complied with all the requests and comments of the code meeting.
With the exception of the tree warden.
The tree
We
warden.
are doing it as a condition of approval.
Yep, I see the common mail facilities, I see the dumpster. Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
So just very briefly, by way of further housekeeping, as I said, we did have the code enforcement minutes, 5/22/18. I believe we've addressed those except for the condition of approval with regard to Jeff Minder's comments, which we endorse. I did have Mr. Gallanti prepare, dated July 20, a traffic letter. Basically, it's a 2-page letter that we provided Mr. Wendt, I think yesterday, and it details his findings that this proposed development will be less intense in terms of peak hour impacts than the original traffic study looking at the 24-unit application that was approved. We also, you'll note the engineering comments. As Pat said, we changed nothing with regard to the site engineering, so that was approved. We also confirmed with the Inland Wetlands Agency that our permit was in good effect because nothing changed. And I don't think it's noted in the code minutes, or maybe it is, but we had meetings with the fire marshal, and I can represent, subject to staff confirmation, that he approves the plan. So, you know, in summary, all things have a path. This is, I think, a very attractive building. It not only constitutes a permitted use in the zone, but I think it's the very type of development that we are endeavoring to continue to bring to the area of the Fairfield Metro train station. I think it will be very successful because of its proximity to the train station, both with regard to retail opportunities and the residential above. And although we, again, want to thank you for your diligence and work and time with regard to the prior application, and although we share disappointment that we're not able to bring that to fruition, we hope you will agree that this is a good alternative, a strong alternative, an attractive alternative, and you'll be good enough to favor us once more with an approval so that we can do something of this nature, do this on this property, which I think will be a good, strong anchor for future development in this area.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fallon. Any members of the public wish to be heard on this? Going once? Going twice? Okay. And I'll close the public hearing, and I will adjourn the meeting.